guys, welcome back to Room 237, and this is a review for a film that I actually bought earlier this month. This Blu-ray came out from Mondo Macabro, I believe, on the 8th of this month, and even though I'm a huge fan of Italian exploitation, I usually don't do blind buys unless I really know what the film is, or what it's about, or how well it was kind of received. Unless it's a giallo. Giallos I always pick up and check out, and I thought this was a giallo. And even upon my first watch, I was like, I don't really see how this is a giallo. Even though it does have a lot of giallo aspects, but I'll get into that. It is the 1969 film, The Laughing Woman, also known as The Frightened Woman. Both titles work. Without revealing it, one title kind of reveals the twist, one title kind of goes along with the course of the film. It was directed by Piero Schivazappa, if I pronounce that correctly, and it's really, we have some supporting characters, but the whole movie is pretty much just the ever beautiful Dagmar Lasseter, who of course she was the one that was screwed out of her lead role in Hatched for the Honeymoon. She was in Forbidden Photos, A Lady Above Suspicion. And Philip Leroy, who, just the way he looks, he kind of reminds me of James Caan, or like if Italy was to do like their version of James Bond, he kind of looks like James Bond. Kind of has James Bond kind of like some of the stuff he does. I mean, how he lives as far as his luxurious life, but also I guess we're supposed to believe his car can just turn into a boat and not question it. And so it was written by Schivazappa. Probably never going to get that name right. Sante Achilli was the cinematographer, and Stelvio Cipriani did the score. And the score is pretty interesting. In some areas it has like your typical Italian giallo score, but it also has some like swing and lounge music. It has, even towards the end, it has like this Western showdown piece that really works. And I thought this movie was very interesting. It only reminded me of The Killer Is Not Alone, only because I was really stumped as to whether this was a giallo. But as far as how it's shot and the way it's presented and the performances, it reminded me more of A Quiet Place in the Country. Even the whole idea of these two characters being secluded away for a weekend at Leroy's home, not just his home, but his secret home within a home, complete with a driveway inside and everything. Kind of like Quiet Place in the Country. But it does have some sort of Kubrick-esque cinematography like Quiet Place in the Country. Even like one of the opening scenes where Dagmar Lasseter, who plays Mary, walks into Dr. Sayer's office, played by Leroy, and just this wide shot of her walking into this huge, huge room and just hearing the echoey sounds of her footsteps as the camera just kind of follows her. There's a lot of wide shots. Even some of the interior design of Sayer's home, a lot of dark black rooms with some of the furniture having white or red lights. Is this very, I don't know if postmodern is the right term, but this very sort of postmodern or kind of futuristic look to it. Kind of like some of the set design in the 2001 Spaceship or Clockwork Orange. So whether the Kubrick influence, there was a Kubrick influence, or it's just something I noticed or something I saw, it definitely made a good experience for viewing. And I did think this was a good movie. This will not be in my Giallo playlist because ultimately it's not. It does have some Giallo aspects. I mean, it does have the twist ending. We do have, it is rather stylish. It does follow, 1969. It is pre-Argento, following the sort of sins and perversions of the super wealthy. So it does fit with some of the Giallo tropes, but it's more of just a 60s example of an erotic thriller. I know people don't like that term, erotic thriller, but that's what this is, and this is not a Giallo. It wasn't in any of Troy Howarth's Giallo books. I think I saw this pop up on like upcoming Giallo Blu-ray releases, and so I just assumed it was. I picked it up anyway, but I'm glad I did because I did enjoy this film. The main story is, Leroy plays Dr. Sayer, who's this very rich guy, and Lassiter plays Mary, who's this journalist who's trying to write this article on this sort of movement that involves male sterilization as a form of birth control. So she goes to meet with Dr. Sayer for an interview. They both have conflicting ideas. And he eventually abducts her and submits her to a weekend of games of slave and master, sexual humiliation or torture, and plants the idea that he's going to kill her by the end of the weekend. And so she's essentially this prisoner of this sadomasochistic rich guy. But eventually she finds a way to kind of break through his surface, turns the tables on him, and then it's sort of this battle of the sexes, which very, very much was a product of its time as well. But there's also a lot of symbolism in this film, and I think the filmmakers were going for more of a feminist kind of approach to this kind of material. I will say that the character of Dr. Sayer, because Giallo has always been called a misogynistic Giallo genre, same with the slasher. And sure, you can have some lurid, violent, misogyny, like say New York Ripper, but just from like a psychological standpoint, without really any of like that kind of violence, I always find stuff like that more effective. Like, as I've said before when I did my gangster reviews, I find scenes like the pistol whipping in Goodfellas and the cornfield bats in Casino to be more effectively violent and more graphically violent than something in like a Saw or a Hostel film. So even though movies like New York Ripper can be very sleazy and graphically violent towards women, more so just the beliefs of this guy, how he goes about it. He's sort of the embodiment of misogyny, and she's a believer in, I don't think she comes out and says that she's a feminist, but she does have some feminist views, and it kind of does turn into this battle of the sexes, almost like a cat and mouse. Because when she turns the tables, he starts to fall in love with her, and eventually, the hunter will become the hunted. And I thought that was very interesting. I love the set design of this movie. I love the performances, especially Lassiter. Obviously, I've seen her in other films, but she's never reminded me of Amy Adams as much as she did in this. But she did fantastic. And I mean, for the first half of the film, because he abducts her, brings her to his house, and then, or she goes to his house to get some more material to research. And then that's when he drugs her, goes in. It's pretty cool how he has like this tunnel driveway into his more secluded secret house where he's going to subject her to all this. And I love how it looks. Like when she first wakes up, she's like tied up to this rack with this red light in this black room. But they do their slave and master stuff. Like after his shower, she holds his robe and then has to like lotion his feet and his ankles. And just the way he sits down, puts his feet up, is just like is very commanding. He even makes her have sex or simulate sex with a life-size dummy of him. Makes her sit at the table with tape on her mouth while he puts marmalade on a baguette and eats it. He does set a trap for her with like a retractable knife. He doesn't really get too violent with her, except for like when he hits her with a power hose, which you can tell that was cold because when it's done, she is all red. And he even takes this very, as she's rolling around in pain and cold from the hose in this empty pool, he's just taking photos of her in a very sort of demeaning and like show of dominance. He takes a photo of himself like sort of standing over her with his foot on top of her while she's down. And he has this fear. He's always associated women and sex with death, which we find out why later. And he has this fear of men losing their power, their virility, and he has this strong hatred for sort of growing self-sufficient women, because I guess with this male sterilization, that he does go on something about how women will be able to pick a test tube with however kind of baby they want, and the male will pretty much become useless. But he also talks about scorpions, and I do think that if this was a giallo, I think it should have been named something like Scorpion Mates with Death, or just like a cool animal or bug, something death, just something kind of poetic and cool sounding, because that really is his whole driving force. We find out when he was, and this isn't really a spoiler, but when she, because there is probably one of the better, more sadistic scenes is well, actually there's also this bed that's divided in half by a wall that can move, and when she thinks she's having privacy, he moves it to show he's there. It's two-way so he can see through it. But he presents this slideshow of all the photos of all these women that he's killed in various stages of like nudity and blood and him posing in front of them with loud audio of them screaming. Eventually she convinces him that you're rich, you're good looking, you're highly intelligent, you're very successful. Women will lust after you, and you could probably mentally torture them to suicide. You don't have to physically torture them. Eventually this has got to get old. Screams will all sound the same, blood will all look the same. You're not going to get anything from it. She suggests that, if you've always associated women, sex, and death together, maybe someday you'll experience true love. And she proposes that she, why not she sort of take over, do this cure, make him fall in love, kind of cure him of his sadism. Which her first attempt is doing this very long, sort of sexy swing dance while she's dressed like this. And there are parts of the film like that does kind of grind it to a halt a bit. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's absolutely beautiful, but it does kind of grind the film down. Although, it is interesting how he has these sculptures that kind of look like barbed figures. So she dances around him, because I think this is just tissue. It kind of pulls it off, so she kind of dances and it reveals more. But, you know, she still believes that she's going to be killed by the end of the weekend. He even shows her this mannequin that's in this bondage, so she's like hogtied, suspended from the ceiling, totally encased except for this, saying, you know, it's designed to drive you mad, kind of hinting maybe I'm gonna put you in this. But he puts her in some dress, makes her kneel on a cement block while he plays the chamber organ, has her play while he, you know, touches her all over. Then they start to kiss, and she kind of like claws him in the back of the head passionately. And there's this great giallo shot of like diagonal up close of his eyes, like not liking it. He retreats, then slaps her, you know, shackles her to the cement block, hands behind her back, and cuts her hair super short, which I'm still kind of confused about the ending as far as her hair goes. I'm gonna save that for spoilers. Even the ending as a whole, I'm still kind of confused exactly how it happened. But he sort of has a change of heart at this point, because he leaves for a bit, comes back, and sees that she's overdosed on all these pills. So he induces he induces vomiting, and then he laments that maybe this would be a good time for spoilers, but this is when he starts to really succumb to her cure and fall in love with her. But I thought this was, you know, pretty interesting. Goes at a good pace. I mean, it's this says 90 minutes. I've seen other places say it's 108. I'm not really sure. It is quite stylish. You do get some fantasy scenes of like this giant open room with these, you know, giant legs with a door of what's it called? Vagina dentata, where like the door opens up like teeth. There is one blatant, you know, really on the nose thing of symbolism with a flatbed and an all-female band with wind instruments. I'll get to that. But yeah, I think they were going for a more feminist approach, because they really made him out to be like the most misogynistic character that they could come up with. And it turns into like a battle of the sexes, and I thought that was pretty interesting, especially how it's done. Really like the score. It did feel more, I would put it in the same class as like A Quiet Place in the Country, where it is a little better filmed and acted, written. I don't want to say the word elevated, but you know, the sort of the Kubrick kind of well made. Yeah, again, I thought it was a giallo. It's not, but even so, if you're a fan of Italian exploitation, it's definitely worth checking out. But yeah, I've been meaning to get to this for a while, but things have been hectic lately, so haven't been able to. But I'm going to get into spoilers now, so. And so it's actually at this point, after he's induced her vomiting from the overdose, she asks if he's still going to kill her, and he says, you know, no, I'm not, because I've never actually killed anyone. All the women you saw in the photos were prostitutes or women that I paid to pose that way for me and kind of go through this weekend-long sort of excursion or of exhibitionism. Oh, I never did explain the scorpion thing, but because when she proposes her cure, he wants her to admit that she's just trying to save herself, and she says she doesn't fear death. She believes in reincarnation. So we start saying, oh, maybe you'll come back as this or that. Then finally he says a scorpion. But then later, he says, you know, he was 12 or 13 when he learned how scorpions mate, which is right at the moment of climax. The female eats the male. And when he found this out, he thought the female was very treacherous, so he killed the scorpion. And he just always associated just women as that, totally tearing down and killing the power of man, and sort of the castration almost, whether that be physical or literal, totally being cut down, and developed this totally misogynistic view on women. Has had this like sadistic drive and obsession, and a real obsession to one day kill a woman, which he did have the chance when she was shackled, and when he cut her hair, he held the scissors up, but he says he couldn't bring himself to do it. But thus begins the second half of the film, where he's pretty much under her spell. He's already admitted that he's kind of fallen in love with her, and she's kind of pulling his leash, kind of giving him a little bit, then pulling away. Like the first scene, we see them in their own shower, then they go into like this, you know, full body dryer, which they start kissing, and she reaches over, cranks his up to get him all hot. Then they start kissing towards the shower. She pushes him in, turns it on cold. Then they go out into this field, which another great shot, just a great wide shot, just the grassy fields, and even just this great line of like the yellow flowers and just grass, how they just kind of run and frolic towards the camera. I thought that was a great shot. Also, in the beginning, when she first tries to escape this narrow driveway and he's behind her in the car, the way she's running towards the camera, like this dolly shot, again, something very Kubrick. We've seen that before in hundreds of films, but just the way this was shot, it just looked so different. It looked great. And they sort of have like a photo shoot. She takes a bunch of pictures of him. You know, they're having fun, chasing each other around, playing. She even leads him on this long chase where he gets tired. Eventually, they're sorry, something popped up. Eventually, they're at this stop for this flatbed to go by. And at first I was confused if he's starting to kind of daydream or have these fantasies, because it looked like she's going down while he's in the driver's seat, and this flatbed with the all-female band goes by. Is these extreme close-ups of women, you know, exaggeratingly using their instruments. But then it kind of like someone behind him honks, so when he drives off, like she's already sitting up. So I was confused if like he was just fantasizing about it and that's how it's showing it to us, or if it was just set up weird and she did do it for real, but then in the next shot she was sitting up. And then he just drives into the water. So apparently the car is also a boat. He takes her to this old castle that has a restaurant. Takes her to this one private room where I guess dwarves used to entertain this one duke. And of course, he's still trying to have sex with her, and she keeps trying to push him off. They eat lunch, and then I believe it's at the end where it's that scene with the big open room and the legs where the door is the vagina with the teeth, and the voiceover is him saying, you know, he fears for his virility, he fears, you know, I guess letting go, because I guess letting go is kind of like him feeling he's being castrated. But beyond the door, you know, of course, I think that door is just in his head. It's a fantasy. But there's also her voiceover when she first proposed, curing him. She talks about having sex in the tall grass, or here, or there, or in the water. So she's already in the pool. He gets in, and this when you have like that Western standoff music as they approach each other. It's composed and shot very well. It does build, I was gonna say tension, but not really. So they finally start having sex in the corner of the pool, and then he just like sinks back and just sinks. Now, and dies. Now I'm not 100% on exactly what happened, because she then gets out of the pool and she still has her short hair, but she takes the wig off, which to show she still has long hair. But we saw him cut her hair off, so maybe he put a wig on her and then cut the wig to his liking, and she still had her real hair. But either way, I guess because he did say at one point, "I like you better with shorter hair," so it's kind of her saying like, "To hell with you." She throws it so it floats by him, and then it shows her just, you know, she didn't really overdose. She put all the pills that she led him to believe she OD'd on. She hit him. She put him back, and then she meets up with this blonde prostitute who we see in the opening of the film, being paid and dropped off. And we see that Mary is paying the prostitute, but I guess it was for information about Sayer, because this whole thing was planned. The whole movie was planned. Even the first half, when she was the slave to his master, she was just kind of biding her time until she could get the upper hand. Because then when she gets home, which again, I love the look of her home as well. That really has like an ending 2001, like just that white room, and the way she's kind of doing her yoga poses in the center. It's kind of like the monolith from 2001 towards the end. So I love how that looks. She's looking through the photos, takes a picture of Sayer, and she has this photo album. Each page is a different man, and then she put Sayer's picture in there. Now, not to say that she's a serial killer that goes after these, you know, misogynistic, chauvinistic men that think they can just control and run and do whatever they want with women. But their power, but at the very least, their power's been taken away from them. It doesn't come out and say it. I mean, maybe she killed all of them, or maybe she, you know, was able to emasculate one or some of them enough. But then it shows there's an empty page next to him, implying that she's going to continue doing this, which means the battle of the sexes could go on forever, which is probably the best symbolism that is in the film. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Oh, and when she's in the car with that prostitute, she says something about how when the prostitute told her that Sayer had, what did she say, a coronary or something? I'm guessing he had a weak heart. So that's why when they were out on their date, out in the field, she was always having him run and exert himself. And so then finally, you know, when they're having sex in the water, in the pool, his heart gave out. And I also like how when he enters the door of the vagina with the teeth, it does look like a cheesy science classroom skeleton that's just kind of, when the doors open again, then it crumbles and the skull rolls. I guess to show that he walked into his own death. And he was essentially killed like the scorpion that, you know, sent him on this life path of misogyny. But yeah, I thought this was a very solid film. I thought it was well written, well acted, very, very well shot. I really liked the score. A lot better than I expected. Of course, it's always kind of disappointing when you think you're going to get a giallo, then it's not. So it's a good thing I'm a fan of Italian exploitation anyway. But yeah, this is definitely worth picking up. And I really like these Mondo Macabro releases anyway. And I'm sure you can make like hour-plus long video on the themes and the sort of interpretations about certain scenes and the battle of the sexes aspect of the film, whether they were going for an overall feminist film or just trying to have the two extremes of each character. But also when she drops the prostitute off at the end, she does talk about how, men like him are all the same, they can't keep pushing us women around, stuff like that. And even if they were going for, a full-on feminist film, I found this way more enjoyable and effective than some of the stuff in that direction that comes out today, like 2019 Black Christmas, which is just laughable. I actually thought this was a pretty good movie. And so, yeah, the laughing woman kind of goes with the twist where she was in on it the whole time. She knew what was going to happen, what was going to go on. Because the prostitute filled her in on pretty much his whole routine. I guess everything he does is more or less kind of routine. And so like she got the last laugh. But the alternate title, The Frightened Woman, is more so her throughout the film, as we're supposed to believe. But yeah, very solid movie. I really enjoyed it. If you stuck through the spoilers, I still recommend it. So yeah, I will be doing the Q&A as soon as possible. I've been trying to get caught up on all the movies I watched. I still have to do 1982's The Entity, which I finally saw. I watched that recently. Don't Go in the Woods Alone, the slasher film. Saint Maud, I really want to do a review of. And I will be doing more A24 films because I'm falling in love with A24. They're really becoming like my favorite film company for modern and recent horror films. And of course the Q&A, and there's still, I think, 1 or 2 trailer reactions I want to do. There's at least one, so, but things are still hectic. I gotta really pick my time wisely for making videos. But, so bear with me for the time being, but yeah, I did enjoy this. Erotic thriller, not a giallo, but still good. Anyway, thank you for watching.